Hello, this is 6B, Kenneth L. Roth Jr. again. As I said, the Sylvania prosecutor would not file charges. Anyways, unfortunately, and due to reasons beyond my control, one of my rent checks that was placed into escrow had bounced. This was not done intentionally. And anyways, I had made several attempts and had talked to the Sylvania courts, the clerk of courts for the civil division, and had tried to make payment arrangements. She said that they couldn't accept payments, that, I explained the situation that there was reasons beyond my control that a check had bounced. I did not do it intentionally. And she said no, that I would have to pay the full balance. And I says, well, I couldn't do it at that time. She said then we will have to file charges. So I said okay. They filed the charges. After they filed it, she said, by the way, before they filed the charges, she told me that once they filed the charges, then I could make payments on that rent, on that check that had bounced. They wouldn't accept payments before they filed charges. They would only do it after they filed charges. That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, they filed the charges. I had found out that they had placed a warrant for my arrest. I called up the clerk of courts. They did indeed tell me that there was a warrant for my arrest. I told them that I would be in the very next morning at 8:30 to go in front of the judge. I was on my way to the courthouse. When I was 2 blocks away from the courthouse, I was stopped by a Sylvania City policeman. I was then arrested. 2 blocks. I informed the policeman where I was going. I told him that I was going to the courthouse to face these charges. And yet, he still took me into custody. He then took me into custody, took me to the courthouse. I went in front of Judge Ramey. Judge Ramey, before he would release me on my own recognizance, OR bond. I'm having a hard time with that word. Anyways, before I could get out of custody, I would have to give him my new address, which I did without a problem. They said they would eventually, the very next week or two, I had to go back and face these charges in Sylvania court. I was given a public defender. The public defender would not allow me to enter into evidence, and that they also told me that the Sylvania prosecutor would not accept any evidence unless it was payment in full, or at least a payment arrangement. Now, like I had said before, I could show proof that I did not do it intentionally. I also had a letter written by a friend of mine that loaned me the money to pay for that check. Now, this was before they filed the charges. Unfortunately, they filed charges before I could get that money to them. And this was after I told them that I had the money, believe it or not. Anyways, they sent it down. Sylvania prosecutor and the court-appointed attorney would not allow me to enter this evidence. They said they would have to send it down to Lucas County because it was a felony. They sent it down to Lucas County Common Pleas Court, where they neglected to inform the court or the clerk of courts of my new address, which I had given before I was even released from custody by Sylvania. Consequently, 2 to 3 months later, I had 6 cops showed up at my doorstep. They took me into custody. I had to spend 4 days in jail. During that 4 days, when I was booked, there was a deputy, the booking officer. He allowed me to keep my nitroglycerin, a bottle of it. I told him that I had a very serious heart condition, and I showed him the meds that showed him a list of the meds I was on. He said, not a problem, I'll let you keep the nitro. The very next morning, during that Friday night, I ended up taking 7 nitros due to chest pain. I asked the deputies to see a nurse. I was refused. I then was finally able to see a nurse due to a very nice Lucas County deputy. He went and got the nurse where she came down, they took me out of the bullpen, put me into a chair right outside the bullpen where she started to do a blood pressure, a pulse, and that was it. She didn't even give me an EKG. She didn't even do a pulse ox. She is a nurse. She diagnosed me with anxiety. She didn't even do a 12-lead EKG. That's against the law. It's also against the law for her to diagnose me with anxiety. She also took my bottle of nitro, brought back 3 nitro tabs in a baggie, which I could keep on my person. She said I wasn't allowed to have a glass container. Finally, on Monday, after complaining of chest pains all weekend, they finally took me down to the infirmary, where a nurse took me into a room, took my pulse ox, my blood pressure, and my pulse. And once again, no 12-lead EKG was done. She diagnosed me again with anxiety. I informed her of all the drugs that I was not being allowed to take because I didn't have it there. And once you go into custody, they're obligated to give you your meds and to obtain those meds from either a pharmacy or a hospital, or to take the inmate to the hospital so that he can get those drugs. I was refused that. She said she would have to call my doctor or the pharmacy to obtain authorization. She did that. Later that morning, she got authorization. But yet, even with that authorization, she never gave me my meds. She gave me 2 meds, 2 of which of the least ones that I needed. I informed my cardiologist of this, and he said they sure in the hell ran the risk of me having a heart attack. All because they were too damn cheap to go get me my meds. Consequently, I was finally released 4 days later. Now, if the Sylvania prosecutor hadn't maliciously tried to prosecute me, this would have never even gotten to Lucas County. If he would have allowed me to enter evidence in that case, it would have never gotten to Lucas County. It would have been dismissed. But yet, he's willing to prosecute me over something I didn't do than to file charges against Michael Helmanack for things he did do and could be proven. This is totally ridiculous. And to make this case in point, the gentleman, not Julia Bates, but a assistant DA of Julia Bates, had the case. He allowed me to enter that evidence, and consequently, 3 weeks later, that case was dismissed at the prosecutor's request. Some questions for the Inspector General to ask. Why? Why the abuse? Why the waste of taxpayers' money? End of Part 6B.